No worries. So I've got Matt on the line here. So just a bit of an introduction, Matt. So just want to give a bit of an overview on your enterprise here and what type of soil types you've got.
Yeah, right. So just myself with it, 2,500 hectares and what we call the home farms where you are, sort of all along that road and a little bit further north. From anything from pretty heavy boron country right at the front there off the road to when you move towards the lake, and it's a nice sandy loam, a little bit of lime through it as well. And then as we push further north, it's sort of just more loamy up there. And then, Western Andalia, I've got a couple of pretty sandy blocks out there. Very deep sand and a bit of everything.
So you're currently in Bendigo, waiting to come home. You've been sitting there for 2 weeks. How have you been managing the farm in that time?
Oh, yeah, it's been frustrating to be stuck down here for 2 weeks. Thought I'd be down here for about 7 or 8 days, but look, remotely, that's all I've been able to do. I've had Dad, he's had a bit of time away from the co-op, and he's been doing most of the work for me, and I've just been through ops centre jobs and jumping on remotely onto the tractor for the spreader or anything like that. Set up a work plan before I left. Loaded that on, and I can just jump on the phone and jump on ops centre at the same time and get him going, and we're right. And then also I've got a Patriots price, so I can't jump on there, but a bit of FaceTime and we can sort that stuff out. But through Ag World and Ops Centre and all that sort of stuff, it's pretty much how I've run show the last 2.5 weeks.
Good to hear. So we've just gone for a walk out at McMillan's and gone to that sandy rise that you spoke about, and got everyone to have a bit of a look, and got Bridget to give an overview on what she saw from the data that she collected. Do you want to just give a bit of an eye, or just give everyone a bit of an insight into what your thoughts are into the future of how you're going to manage soaks and sandhills and the like?
Yeah, going forward, so we'd like to have done something a lot earlier, but till this year we're sort of telling the seeder with the front wheel. We had a front wheel assist that was doing everything, so it just wasn't going to pull a ripper, or I was a bit worried about traction with the seeder as well. So we've got a bigger tractor now. So going forward in the future, we need to. There's some definite priorities in terms of ripping. I think I reckon I'm seeing your reflection there, Jordan. You're standing in front of the barn, but straight towards the lake, there's a little soak starting to form there, and then down the bottom, and then to your south, over beyond those pine trees, there's a pretty big soak starting to form there. So we just can't afford to lose any more country, really. It's good, productive country until we let it not be, I suppose. I'll be looking to do a bit of ripping through there. One of my things I would definitely want to get right beforehand was pH, just checking on that, which Bridget done that work for me, and I was a bit surprised actually that it wasn't showing any acidity there. It was in pretty good ranges, so that was one thing that was good to know before I start getting into the amelioration process. If I'm going to do it, I want to do it all at one time, and get it right from the start, hopefully. Obviously, if I started earlier, I just would have went and ripped those areas, but probably just through things I see throughout my job and that, being an agronomist, there's a few more boxes I want to tick off before we get right into it.
Going back to planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance on that one, Matt?
That's essentially right, Jordan, that it's just such a big cost in doing this stuff if you want to get it right. The return's pretty good if you can get it right, but in terms of, like I said, down the front there's a bit of boron, there's some lime in those hills. want to make sure I'm getting the right areas. And really, the only way to do that is start with the remote stuff first, then start ground truthing it, and then we can get those maps sorted so that we're hitting the right areas where we want it.
So I'll be getting Trav up in a little bit to have a chat about his precision agronomy business as a part of Crop Opti. Doing prescription deep ripping, like looking at, that's where that data that you've collected from Bridget is going to give you the insights to make that happen.
Yeah, that's one thing of it. Definitely, like I said, making sure we get the right areas. The other key part for me is labour. So obviously I'm away a few days a week doing that, so I'm not always going to be the one on there doing it, whether it's, I've got either dad on there or, a backpacker or something like that. It's just the ability to put anyone on there and know you're getting it right. That's one of the biggest things for me, is that's where this all fits in, is that I can monitor it remotely or set it up remotely, but it's making sure anyone can be there so the wheels are turning if I'm not there, and still making sure it's as I would be doing it, really.
So looking at things like turn automation, section control, prescription, whether it's prescription application, prescription ripping, you can have an unskilled operator there to make things work and in effect still be as if you're operating the machine to your standard.
Yeah, if you can set it up right from the start, and get those things in place, then it becomes pretty easy operation after that.
I was going to say we'll start to wrap it up there, Matt. Any sort of final thoughts that you want to share with the group here?
Probably just over the time. I mean, especially in the last 3-4 years, really, land prices have risen quite significantly, and in our area, soaks are getting worse as well. So we're losing valuable land at the same time, and it's pretty hard to replace that. So my thing is just making sure we can get things right, produce more, or make what we've got more productive. There's big areas in paddocks like that paddock that you're in would be probably 20%, I reckon, up for improvement. And if I can put the work into that and lift that 20%, to probably 80% of the rest of the paddock in terms of yield wise. At the moment, it's probably sitting at 40 to 50%. What it is, and it's just not sustainable long term, really. We've got to make those areas improve, and they're the areas that in a dry year we'll do better, but we've got to get that to even out a bit more. And you go further south, average yields are always generally better in a good year, just because of the levelness of the paddocks, whereas the further north you go, the more variability you got. The yields jump up and jump down even in a good year, so we've just got to be able to level that out, which is, I think it's an exciting time because we've got the tools there to do it and help become more productive, which is ultimately the end goal. So.
No worries. Any questions for Matt from the audience that is burning a hole in your mind, or pretty? Yep.
George, setting up initially to get into your digital automation, what's the process with that? Do you need boundaries, or where do you start?
The question is, where do you start, Matt? I'll get you to answer that one first, and then I'll answer that.
Depends on what software you got, but Jordan can probably help you out there. But boundaries are a start. You get your boundaries loaded in, and then the tools on that sort of follow after you've got your farm mapped, which you don't have to drive around in a ute. You've probably got, depends how accurate you want them, you've probably got all the data off your existing sprayer or seeder or anything sitting there. That's the thing with all this. I think everyone's got the data there that's why we pay so much for these machines. They've got all these capabilities. It's just about probably extracting it out of them.
And having the people to assist to extract that data, and we'll talk about that a bit with Jack later in the day, comparing farm data to race data and the insights we gain from, but making sure that you've got the right people in your corner. The same as your clients employing you to be their agronomist to provide them their insights as well.
Yeah, no, it's just yeah. If you have someone there to help you along the way, it becomes a lot less confusing, and you're probably more likely to do something with that data if you've got someone there helping you along who's got a bit of insight into it.
And Dunk, to go to your question, very much start with a solid foundation. That client farm field, grower farm field, boundaries, product lists, machines. Get your house in order first. That's where I'd start before you can even start to think about automation, moving on to autonomy. Any other questions? I think you've done a great job there, Matt. We'll let you go, and really appreciate you hosting us today.
No worries. Sorry I couldn't be there. I was hoping to be home yesterday afternoon, but yeah, wasn't quite to be, so hope you have a great day.
No worries. Can we give it up for Matt? Ellie? Thanks, Matt. No worries. We'll move on to the next part, which I'm going to be talking with Trav here from Crop Opti and discussing his business and where the precision agronomy fits in there. So, Terry, would you like to come up and we'll have a bit of a duet?
Don't have to cuddle, do we?
No, there should be another mic. Thank you very much. So we've got Travis here from Crop Opti Horsham. Trav, would you like to give the group an insight and into your business and what you're about?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for everyone for coming first up. I would also like to thank Hoislers for putting the day on and inviting us along. I'm Trav Hare. I run a business out of Horsham called Crop Opti Services. We've got a staff of basically sort of 4 agros at the moment, and we run a precision ag business as well as agronomy and merchandise. And yeah, basically we've been chipping away now at PA for probably around about 7 years. We were originally with Nutrien going back a while back. We won't speak too much about that, with a few Nutrien hats getting around at the moment. So we broke away from Nutrien probably about 18 months ago. We saw a different direction in the way we wanted to go. And yeah, since then, we've sort of evolved our PA business through the Wimmera and obviously now into the Mallee with doing what we're actually doing. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. We originally were working with George, what was that? 5
years ago.
5 years ago. So
Hair was still grey, but it was a bit darker.
Yeah, it probably was. So that was back in the early stages, a little bit of where PA was starting to probably evolve a little bit. Look, a lot of things have changed since then. We've changed the way we do things from a precision agronomy point of view. We were originally running EC flat maps. Some of you guys that maybe have dealt with Echelon or Precision Ag, they're basically what we call just an EM38 or an EC flat map. We're teamed up with a company out of Canada called SWAT. I'm not too sure whether many have heard about SWAT. SWAT's very similar in the way we actually do our mapping. On Matt's farm here, rather than just having a flat EC map, we've actually got around about 7 or 8 different layers of maps. So we run RTK with all our SWAT maps. So we're down to 1 centimetre accuracy. Our maps will provide a topography map, a soil map, basically with hills, depressions and the works of that. And then basically we go out afterwards and we ground truth these maps. We talk to the growers about the points that we're actually soil testing. I still believe at the end of the day, the grower is the most knowledgeable person on your farm, unless you've been lucky to have an agro for a real long period of time. And growers are a really great source of information about what they're seeing in the paddock, why that's actually occurring, and their experiences too. So, without the help of the grower, the maps give us really good relevant information, but at the end of the day, everything comes back to ground truthing and, making sure that, we're ticking off these things properly.
I think you do bring up a great point there, Trav, about ground truthing. Like, we can have all the data in the world, but if we're not getting our boots muddy, then where do we go? Like, we're just really looking at the calibration of the machine and putting the faith in those calibration factors.
Oh, yeah, look, and I think when it comes to machinery, you'd like to think that, it's going to be as good as what it gets. But it was interesting to hear from Matt, who's, obviously a grower and an agronomist, that he probably thought there was more variability through this paddock in particular. And you sort of look at it and you sort of go, well, yeah, there probably should be. But once we actually went over it, the elevation out here actually looks quite steep, but it's really not. It's nowhere near as bad as it looks. So, and it was interesting to hear from Matt about, his experience on what he thought was sort of where. And we see that quite often in paddocks, guys tend to come back and go, I didn't think that was going to be like that. So obviously the first thing we want to do is go and ground truth that. So
yep. And taking that grower information, like you say, like the grower is the best
source of information.
It's really taking the data that you're collecting, being able to make a decision and put that information into a machine to automate the grower's decision and knowledge.
Oh yeah, look, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, and Matt touched on it again there before, we've seen, probably over the last few years with the rising, land prices going up, we run a little bit of a theory that if you're probably not farming your place to about 80% of your capabilities, what's gone to the point of going out and forking out a heap of cash to, go and buy some more that, quite honestly, and excuse the French, you're probably somewhat fucking it up a little bit. So I think that, nowadays there's so many different avenues, with getting things right. The data that we get from soil, the data we get from testing, and the machine capability too nowadays. And I don't want to throw any salesmen under the bus here, but, at the end of the day, you go and buy a brand new machine nowadays, it's generally going to have the capabilities of actually doing this. These guys aren't going to give you a discount if you're not going to use it, I'm sure of that. So, one thing we have seen, and Hoislers are very good at it, we're from Horsham, so we see a bit of Jord, obviously, but the one thing that we do see is that machinery companies nowadays are actually taking a lot more interest in what you guys as growers obviously want to achieve and trying to find a better return on investment for you guys. And at the end of the day, you buy these machines, they're capable of doing all these, cool things nowadays, and, lean on them a little bit and get them to point you in the right direction, because there are quite a few good guys out there nowadays that are making some really good headway into this whole space. So
just thinking about the equipment and what technology is available, like at Hoises we do equipment, technology and dealer services. Equipment and technology, that's no different to any other John Deere dealer in Australia. We've got the same products. It's our dealer services that are going to be a differentiator.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And like I said, it's one thing for the growers to kind of, push this, one thing for the dealer to kind of push this onto the grower. But I think as growers nowadays, it's really important that when you are looking at a new machine or you're actually thinking about doing something different, talk to the guys that are doing it out in the other paddocks and talk to the dealers. And to be fair, nobody ever knows everything. I think that's, pretty normal, but these guys will be able to point you in the right direction. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to return on investment for you guys purchasing machines and purchasing tech. Quite honestly, we've got guys that deal with green and we've got guys that deal with red. I'd prefer they all went either probably green or at least green screens in their red tractor, because from our point of view, when we're actually creating these variable rate maps, for us and for using Operations Centre, Bridget does most of it for us and it's very seamless. And the one thing it really does do, it takes out your ability to think you actually can't do it. All you guys as growers need to understand is what you're trying to achieve, how you're going to try and get there, what it's going to cost, and at the end of the day, it's a machine that's actually going to do the work for you. There's no actual extra work. You can be the oldest bloke going around. We had a guy this year who's 60. He stepped straight into precision ag from knowing nothing. And, you know, it screens and that and things like Operation Centre that make it easy for him. You know, he just presses a shape file, he presses go, and then the fairies fly out the window and make everything magically happen out the back. So at the end of the day, he knows he's getting a return on his investment, and that's really kind of all he wants to know too. So
looking at Operation Centre and where that fits in the way that you service your clients, Trav, it's becoming more and more of a communication tool, and even going back to what Matt's been doing in the last 2.5 weeks being in Bendigo, it's not just about the data, it's about the communication.
Oh yeah, look, Jordan, absolutely, and I think, you know, we see it from our side of, you know, nowadays when we're entering these prescriptions in the maps, and you know, if you're a guy that's got 2 tractors and you're running 2 spreaders, you know, it can go in the both. So whether you got the most experienced guy in the world sitting on a 8420 and another bloke sitting on something else, we can either transfer that data, or, you know, you guys nowadays have the ability to actually transfer it between screens and screens too. It's not difficult. Jord run me through it, and, you know, it's actually quite easy. So, and again, like Matt said, you know, it's about creating these platforms as well, you know, these workflows. And
looking at the bigger, wider digital ecosystem that's out there, and how you move data between platforms without having to sit there and spend hours upon hours combing through data, like wherever Adrian is. Like, I know that's, where are you, Adrian? There he is. Like someone like Adrian's just loves sitting there waiting, watching the spinny wheel going. I don't lie. Just making it simple, like just not having to sit there and just comb through data. Like you want to be able to have the information at your fingertips, and
yep.
being in the paddock.
And there's other benefits to, you know, machinery data. We don't take a great deal of notice of machinery data, to be quite honest. But machinery data is a really useful tool for us as agronomists nowadays, that if we go through and we see it quite often. I log into a couple of my guys' John Deere accounts when they're sowing. You might see them getting up there in speed or something, and you flick through a message and go, oi, you know, pull back the throttle a little bit. You're probably throwing a bit of stuff here, there and everywhere. So we've also used it for things like emergence, you know. We've gone out into a paddock and we've seen, you know, this patch here seems to be poor emergence for whatever reason. Jumping on the op centre and going back through and going,
interrogate it and work out what
we become detectives pretty quickly. And the one thing that we always find is that the data doesn't lie. So you can't probably trick us, and you probably can't trick the guys that are actually selling the data as well. But it's a really important tool, probably more than what most people think, when you can actually go back through that data and check, you know, all your diagnostics of how your machine's running. Did you have wheel slippage in this area? What was the emergency issues?
It's really looking at the machine performance. Is it doing the job that it should be doing? Is it calibrated? Is it being driven right? Is it being operated correctly?
And I think nowadays, you know, like Matt said, you know, in a world where it's hard to find, you know, A1 operators everywhere, we do see a lot more backpackers, you know, coming down and working, or even a lot of new guys that are probably, you know, a little bit unfamiliar with the systems and, you know, how a tractor works, you know, wheel slippage and that kind of thing. And I think when you can actually go back through the data at the end of the day, through your diagnostics, I think it's really important. And setting the machine up is probably, again, the most important thing to getting that right.
There's no point having an X9 if you don't actually get the crop in the right way up.
Exactly. So, you know, and nowadays I think too, you know, we've seen a lot of products like Overwatch and that kind of thing come out, and, you know, there's good, bad and ugly stories about it. And generally we find that these new products, you know, you do need some separation between what you're doing. Whether you're running a disc, a single, you're running your RX wheels tight, you're running a tine, all machines are different, but it's really important not just to get the agronomy side right, but the actual getting it into the ground to get that establishment up and going, and especially through areas like where you're sort of really moisture reliant. It's really important to be ticking all these boxes off as much as you can.
It's not a case of just throwing on the ground and just waiting for rain and being in the Western District where it's where it just magically appears.
It's like Jack and the Beanstalk. But definitely I think, we seem to find nowadays that there's probably a lot more guys. And the age-old argument used to always be, hey, look, I farm in the Mallee. Precision ag, it costs too much, I don't need it. Well, and a guy asked me the other day, we're at an event, and he said, how much money can I save actually doing precision ag? And I said, well, what are you trying to achieve? And he said, I'm just interested in the savings. And I said, well, that's simple, champ. I said, you just put 50% of your fertiliser out that you normally would, and you magically save 50%. So he sort of went, oh, well, how's that affect my yield? And I said, well, you're probably going to grow half. So, yep, we're on a roll here. And he sort of went, oh, okay. And I said, look, it's not a cost-saving mechanism. Precision ag, if you're looking at it from a cost-saving mechanism, you may as well not even do it, because what it's about is probably at the end of the day, it's you have a budget. You probably know what your budget is yourself, and it's about applying the right things to the right areas. And if Matt was here today, he'd probably tell you that there's an area down there that could yield 3.5 tonne. There's probably an area down here that will yield 1.5. The concept of precision ag's not so much about to find evenness through paddocks. I think if you're finding evenness through paddocks and you're doing precision ag, you're probably doing it wrong, because number one, you're always going to have better parts of your paddock that are going to yield more. So what we're trying to do is that if that zone's only capable of growing 2 tonne, let's just spend the inputs on growing 2 tonne. But for you guys that know your own paddocks, you probably know that, that back corner is probably capable of growing 3.5. Well, yes, it's going to require a little bit more phosphorus. Yes, you're probably going to have to go and spread 100 kilos more urea to get that 40 to 50 kilos of nitrogen to grow that extra tonne of grain. But, you're spending, say, an extra, we can't get urea at the moment, so you're probably spending an extra $50 a hectare or thereabouts. But if you can actually obtain an extra, 1 tonne of yield through even 15 to 20% of your paddock, it's a lot of money back in your pocket at the end of the day. So I've never come across a guy yet in my whole entire career, and I've been around for a little while, that can walk across a paddock and tell you exactly what they're standing on in the way of phosphorus and nitrogen, or even boron toxic areas like Matty's got down here. So
I was just thinking about going back a couple of years ago, Trav, when you had your country at Netherby and went through and soil mapped and tested and the like, and that was the contract or the business part that you had at the time. That was the first variable rate that they'd actually done, and the actual operator called you up and started asking if it was true and correct.
Yeah, we had a farm, and I think generally we mapped it. We went out, we tested it, and I think most of the paddock, one zone had about 40 kilos of MAP going out. The other zone was a bit better. It actually had 60. We'd actually extracted more crop off that, by using yield data and things like that. We'd actually extracted more, so we had to put a little bit more back out. And the first year we had it, we had one zone which was about 33% of that paddock. It was about sort of 500 hectares or thereabouts, and it actually had 120 kilos go out. And the bloke on the tractor rang me up about 3 times, and he couldn't believe it. He said, "Oh, this is wrong." And I'm going, no, just keep driving. And as we're watching him drive along, we said, another 20 or so metres, it'll cut back into 60 kilos or thereabouts, and, everything's right. And I was talking to the neighbour one day, and he said to me, he goes, "Did you put 120 kilos of MAP out?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, that's ridiculous." And I said, "Oh, why is that?" And he goes, he said, "I've been watching that farm for the last 20 years, and he said straight out, he goes, "That part of the paddock has never, ever grown anything for the guy that had it beforehand. And I said, well, that's pretty obvious. That's why we're putting 120 kilos of, phosphorus out there, because it was just so undernourished that, it was always going to cap out at around about 1.5 tons, no matter what you did. So probably the same thing happened this year over at Beulah. The boys over there, they bought another paddock. They were at 800 hectares and they had 100 kilos go out. It probably needed more, but obviously there's no silver bullet to fix these issues straight away. It's a bit of a work in progress about building that bank up, and also understanding your PBI in your soil as well, because we do have a buffer index that actually will tie phosphorus up. If you're not looking at that buffer index, as well as your coal wall P, you're going to find that you're either going to under apply or over apply, and you're not going to get the results you're after. But
so looking at some of the clients that you've got and the technology they've got on their farm, how's that changed the way that you and the team that you've got here changing your approach to your agronomy?
Yeah, greatly. The one thing, I'll use one grower for an example. He's in Beulah, so he's in the Mallee. They've got a reasonable program to get over. They're running 2 Johnny discs. They're both 60 footers. They've got 4 self-propelled boom sprays they run. They've recently just purchased another 616 See & Spray to go along with their second one. They do run at the moment a Coon air boom, which is all auto shut-offs and everything like that, just to make sure, we're not getting any overlap. That thing's actually going to go in the bin at the end of the year. They're going to go back to straight liquid. So
what was the putting that particular machine in the bin, so to speak? What's the mindset there?
The mindset there is that they definitely want to go back to liquid. They've got a big program to get over. One spreader's not doing enough of it. This year they had a contractor come in. He's running a Breedle, big one. So we had rates of, urea. Well, we were doing a blend up there for those guys, but we had rates this year, and, this was the first year that actually mapped everything early on, that we could actually go out and actually do proper zonal soil testing. The year before, we ran off John Deere elevation maps off their boom spray to make sure that everything was proper accurate, because their boom spray had obviously been over every paddock. But yeah, for these guys, I guess what they're looking at now is that this year they had to get a contractor in. They're spreading rates of up to, nearly 400 kilos around Beulah, which, yeah, it's a little bit, crazy. But, we've done all their yield maps. We've got their data off at the end of the year. Last year they probably averaged 6 tonne in their barley, which up there it's a fantastic result. But straight away we know that that's roughly pulling off over 200 kilos of actual nitrogen. So the replacement on that was, pretty close to 400.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Any questions for Trav before we wrap up? You've got it. Everyone's just full of knowledge.
There you go. So I'll just touch on See & Spray briefly. Yep. Our guys up there at Beulah, they're running 2 now. They're great machines. We've had a couple of years experience with them, doing a little project with John Deere as well, which has been really informative. See & Spray for them up there has definitely saved them a real lot of chemical, I think. Looking at these, and again, we come back to data, we come back to technology, and we come back to Ops Centre, and we jump in the Ops Centre, after these guys have gone out and sprayed a paddock, and it's kind of really cool to actually look at it and look at a spray map on Ops Centre and go, yep, righto, you've sprayed 8% of that paddock, when theoretically we thought there might have been up to 30. So
well even on your tank mixes and your brews, like looking at a broadcast spray compared to using See & Spray, like what sort of what's changed in your chemistry selection?
Oh, a lot. We've actually probably gone back to real basics. During summer, we're probably running a lot of high rates of glyphosate, obviously. Our problem weeds during summer up that way where these guys are obviously fleabane is a big issue. We have some melons, of course. They got a bit of heavy into a bit of light. Marshmallow are probably the main ones, and obviously some thistles as well. So generally our brews have probably, over the years been a lot of glyphosate ester. We chuck some Star Rain in to take care of those marshmallows, and fleabane being a bigger problem, we've sort of had to go to either a Viraxor, which is quite expensive. If you're using it in a broad sense, you're probably looking at around about $24 to sort of $35 a hectare. So, basically it takes that out of the equation when you're trying to get over, 12,000 hectares or something. It's 2 years. So, yeah,
So
basically
really,
back to
really,
basics.
really utilising that investment in the technology to improve the agronomy actually out in the paddock.
Yeah, look, the technology of the See & Sprays actually allowed us to use probably the A1 products that are actually out there. And because we're actually using a lot less of them, our cost per hectare, which I think most guys should be looking at, our cost per hectare when we're using 3 litres of glyphosate per spurt, we're running 130 litres of water on the See & Spray. So every time we go over a weed, that weed's basically getting 130 litres of water equivalent. So coverage is fantastic. Big rates of glyphosate. Viraxor is very popular. Obviously, triclopyr goes in like milk on cereal. And yeah, we're actually reducing our cost because we're reducing our cost per hectare, we're actually able to pick up and use better products that are actually, in the tank mix, and we're achieving way better results. We're actually killing things that, generally you may have to double knock.
You're getting those escapes in the first instance rather than having to double knock and go back with a paraquat or
exactly. Exactly.
Cool. No worries. No, thanks, Trav. Can look at thanks, Trav, for some insights.
Thanks, guys.
So from here now, we'll jump back in the buses, head back to Sea Lake. If you do want to, we'll pop into the shop. If you want to grab your vehicle, here's a chance to grab it. And this, if you want to disperse a bit further south, more than welcome to grab your vehicle. If you want to stay on the bus, that's fine. But that's what we'll do now, and we'll head from here to Sea Lake to Link Lehman's. We'll have lunch, and then we'll go into a chat with Link and go from there.